Welcome to Inner Compass. I'm Shirley Hoogstra. Do you ever find yourself texting at your child's soccer game? Or do you feel like your boss can find you at any time, anywhere? What if I told you that it would be better to have more fences, more boundaries in your life? Does that sound like freedom? Well, actually, it is. Join us today on Inner Compass.
From the campus of Calvin College, this is Inner Compass, exploring how people use faith and ethics to guide them through critical issues of today.
My guest today is clinical psychologist Henry Cloud, a leadership consultant and co-host of the radio counseling show New Life Live. He's also the author of The One Life Solution, Reclaim Your Personal Life While Achieving Greater Professional Success. Welcome, Henry.
Good to be here. Thank you.
It's great for you to be here and to talk about a very timely topic, which is boundaries. In fact, the One Life Solution is about this integration of your whole life, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it started out when I was talking to the publisher, it was going to be boundaries at work. But the more we unpacked it, you know, trying to have boundaries on work today really gets into your whole life, because it's interesting. 15 years ago or so, roughly, you used to go to work and you were at work. So
right.
There was a space boundary around work. When you're at the office, you were doing work, and then you had your personal life. And there was a time, 8 to 5 or whatever it was. Well, then came the cell phone, and the boss could find you anywhere, right, after work.
Correct.
At the soccer field, wherever. Then came the internet, and then the laptop, and then you got the servers, and you can be at home, maybe surfing sports scores, and all of a sudden you see an email come up, and your boss has sent you an email, or a coworker, at 9 o'clock, and then you're back into it, and then the Blackberries. And so now work travels wherever you are, and you've got executives out on date night with their spouses doing the Blackberry. Texting. Or
right.
doing email at their kid's soccer game.
Right.
And in leadership coaching, this thing about getting just quantitative boundaries around what leaders need to focus on and how they spend their time and energy in this age of technology is a huge problem.
And in fact, this idea of lack of boundaries is a lack of this internal core
right.
of who you are as a person, right?
Right, and when you put those two together, when you talk about a boundary as an internal core, what we're talking about is an internal locus of control, that you are, as a person, in charge of where you are going to invest. And when you think about it, all we really have is our time and energy, right?
Right.
So where is your time and energy going to go? Well, if you have an internal compass, then it's going to go to the things that you have purposed it's going to go to. But you look at the technology now and you add that into the equation, and anyone can identify with sitting down at your desk and you've got your agenda and you've got your goals and all of that, and all of a sudden, ding, on your screen, someone else's agenda has now infiltrated your space. And do you have the core to glance at that and know somebody's upset with you?
Right, that maybe you haven't finished something or people are asking you for something.
Exactly, they're putting pressure on you. Well, now, what are you feeling? And when we look at the way executives really work, a lot of them, that's what I call in the book the power drain.
Yes.
And that's where they start to kind of lose it, and they're sitting here trying to work, but so-and-so's upset with me, or I got to get that report in, or at least they have an expectation that I'm going to respond, which is another big problem. And that's where we get to where people begin to crack a little bit. And it's a big deal.
This internal core is made up of a person's values, because you said we only have a limited amount of time and energy
right.
in every day. And we are always pushing that boundary, sleeping less, multitasking more, so we're trying to pack more into that time and energy. Right. It probably even decreases our happiness, because when you can't fully be present or fully focus on something, you're just less engaged, and
right.
that can decrease. But this idea of who are you, what do you believe in, what do you value, actually helps make those decisions on whether you're going to be distracted when these emails or something else comes in, right?
It really does. And the thing that's kind of like an eye-opener here for a lot of people is, normally if you ask someone, do you treat your time and your energy as finite?
I think everybody thinks that they've got more of it.
You never really think about.
Well, you can't see it.
You can't see it, and you think, oh yeah, I can do that. And the way people decide that is they look on their calendar, and if the space is open, they think, oh, I can do that. Well, pretty soon your life begins to look like your garage. And you're collecting more.
Did you see
and more.
my garage?
No, but
because that's what it looks like.
I know people, right? And then people have that horrible moment where, just like in your garage, you're going to throw something away, and then you think, well, I might need that.
Right.
Or I'm attached to that. I can't throw it. It's kind of that.
I'll just put it over there a minute.
Exactly. And you take those two thoughts, I might need that, or I'm attached to that in some way. You apply it to accomplishing your mission in life, or the mission of your company, or your goals, or your objectives. What happens is there are relationships, there are projects, there are assets, there's a host of things that really may not be core to where you're trying to go and what you're trying to accomplish, but you're afraid to let go of them, or you're afraid to let go of those people, or you might need that network of people, or that whatever. And the concept of pruning, I talk in the book about necessary endings. What we see in high-functioning people is they're always pruning. And when they're making space to add new things.
Give me an example of that.
Well, an example, Ford, I think, was it the second quarter this year or one quarter? A profit? Where did that come from?
Whoa.
Whoa. Well, if you look at what happened, they gave up a lot of lines that they had acquired. And they got back to some of the core business. And you see that as a business practice a lot, that organizations many times have taken on lots of product lines or lots of other kinds of businesses that got them away from where the real life of the company is. That would be an example.
And in the
relationships.
Right. In a personal life, let's say that your core values were being with your parents, your children, friends that were important to you, doing a good job at work, and perhaps your church. And then all these other things, requests, good things came in to that. And there are motivators which either help us say yes or don't allow us to say no. You talk about that in the book, these motivators of I need to please people, right? That's a big one. Maybe as a Christian, I should say yes to things because it's a good thing. How do you prune things that, impact our motivators?
Well, there's almost a tree, or remember, was it Maslow's hierarchy?
Right.
Well, there's kind of a hierarchy in this regard as well. And you've got to start kind of foundationally, if you will, the first things that people have got to prune are the things that are literally bad.
Okay.
There are toxic relationships.
Right.
There are toxic practices. There are things that are really either self-destructive or mission-destructive, or something's going on that's adding nothing except something negative.
Okay.
And you've really got to start there, because you're not going to get, and companies have to do this all the time. As a leadership consultant, one of the things that I find myself doing a lot is getting a leader to step up to the plate and get rid of somebody that's changing a culture for the worse.
So a toxic practice in your personal life might be...
It could be a health practice.
Or too much TV or smoking or something like that?
Any of that.
Okay.
It could be, for example, in the personal health realm. It could be in the emotional health realm. It could be negation of disciplines and practices that, whatever. Or it could be relational. There are people whose functioning is affected by interacting with certain maybe extended family members. You'll never be able to do that. Oh, that's stupid. And who throw up all over their goals. Those kinds of toxic, negative or abusive or controlling relationships, that's kind of like 101. That's the foundational level. Okay,
so let's just probe that a little bit more. So let's say that you have a family member who is a chief critic, a curmudgeon. When you're in their presence, they seem to be an energy drainer. Now, on the one hand, you could say, I'm going to put up a boundary and I'm just not going to be with them. But in some ways, as Christians, we say, I'm going to love them and not let their criticism affect me because
Right.
I know who I am in Jesus Christ. Where does your book help us understand that, or your ideas?
Well, if you go past my book to the book,
Yes, exactly, the Bible.
Right. And a lot of the interesting thing to me about the spiritual life is many times when you talk to Christians or people who think they know what Christian is, and because it's what they've seen, it's not what the Bible says. We have these Christian ways of thinking that may have nothing to do with the Bible. Like I should put up with everything. I'm long-suffering. I'm forgiving, and this, that, and the other. Well, the Bible has a range of functioning that it would be a great template to think about leadership, because on the one end, you have very strong disciplines of not tolerating oppression,
Right.
and abuse and pride and arrogance. King David as a leader, he actually said there's certain kinds of people that I'm going to banish from the organization, the company, the country, and I'm not going to put up with liars and cheats and this, that, and the other. Well, that should be corporate policy, right?
Right.
So you start there, and as a Christian, that should be part of how we think. Now, here's the difference. It's not like you walk around and say, well, I'm not going to have anything to do with bad people. That's judgmental. That's not what happens. What you do is you have to set the standards and the values. Same thing in the home. The value would be, for example, a spouse says to an addicted spouse, I'm going to live in a sober environment, period. I would love for you to be here with me.
Right.
I love you. I'm committed to you. But my value is there's not drug addiction and illegal things going on in my home. So you get to choose. See, that's not judgmental. That's setting your values and asking someone if they want to join you or not.
In fact, it's very loving.
It's extremely loving.
Right, because you're saying, look, I care enough about you to do the hard work of setting up a boundary for myself, for our family, and it's going to be better for all of us because I'm going to call it truth.
Well, you go back to the book of Leviticus. This is Moses, the first addiction counselor.
Yeah.
And what he says is that if you don't confront your brother or sister who is doing something destructive, this is in Leviticus 19, you can go look it up, in about 15 through 17 there. It's an amazing addiction formula. It says, if you don't confront somebody, if you don't rebuke them, then you share in the guilt. I mean, that's the prescription of enabling, and that's what later we learned in treatment, that if you don't set limits on the addict, you're part of the problem.
And in fact, it sort of bleeds over into larger circumstances, like
Right.
in the workplace. And another place we were talking about pruning. So if you're a person who's in charge of others and you let someone who's toxic in that workplace, that is impacting all the other
Right.
folks. But you may have the responsibility to do something.
You may have the responsibility to do it, but just like the codependent spouse, you may have internal issues as, I don't want to hurt their feelings, or gosh, if I fire them, what's going to happen, and all of that. And yet the company is depending on that leader to contain that toxicity and to create a house that people can thrive in. And that's where leadership gets tough, and that's where it gets into boundaries.
So there's some things that we can do about that. If you have a leadership role, if you're in a home, you want to be more value-centered, more mission-centered. You talk about doing an audit of your life. What's the benefit of doing an audit, and how hard is it?
Well, the benefit is huge, and the hard is huge.
Yeah.
If you do it well. When you think of a financial audit,
Right.
What do? Everybody can identify with, if you run a company or even your own checkbook, you get to the end of the month or the end of the quarter and you look at the bottom line, you go, wait a minute, I had all this money come in, what happened?
Where did it go?
Where did it go? That's the question.
Right.
So where did it go? So we start to look at the lines. And then you start to realize, wait a minute, do I really need to be spending, do I need 8 movie packages on my cable? And so you find out, where are you losing that precious resource? Because your resources, all money is energy.
Tangible.
It makes things move towards prescribed goals in your life. And so you look at your time and your energy that way. And you begin to say, well, gosh, I started out, it's interesting when people say, well, I don't have the time for that. Well, you get the same amount of time everybody else does. And see, now we get into the audit of the life. When you start out, the way I talk about it in the book is you start out with what are my values? What are my goals? What are my objectives? What is it I'm trying to create in my life? Okay, if I want a good marriage, if I want my kids to be healthy,
Right.
if I want to move my work to a certain end goal, okay, if that's what's important, and we're going to set that over on this side, then you go back and you actually do an audit of how you spend your days. And when I work with leaders, we get into the minutia of this. I want to see their call log.
And probably when they're doing it, are they getting siphoned off
Right.
from chunks of their time?
Exactly. And so then you begin to match up, okay, and I'll look at them and say, well, okay, you spent 2 hours here with so-and-so. What's so-and-so do? Well, so-and-so is our director of operations. And, whoa, stop. You just told me your chief agenda for this quarter was developing new markets and new sources of revenues and new this and that. So-and-so's in existing operations. Why are you spending so much time with so-and-so? Well, it's important. Of course it's important, but it's not what you've said your agenda is for this quarter. So there's a disconnect.
Well, there's a discipline, it sounds to me, like as part of this audit and a part of this know where you're going and choose your time wisely.
Right.
But do people resist this discipline?
Well, that's kind of redundant, isn't it? Resistance and discipline, you know, because that is the problem.
That's the tension,
with
isn't it?
Yeah, and we resist it for a couple of reasons, 3 or 4 reasons actually, but a couple of them. One of the strongest ones is that we have what I call in the book these power drains.
Right.
And we might have the discipline to do something until that one person or that couple of people that are able to hook us in some way and hook the guilt or hook the wanting to please or whatever your own dynamic is, that there are people that can get to us.
Right.
And we will never get back in charge of our time and energy until we face those cracks inside. That's one of it. The other discipline is just structure itself. You know, the concept of structure, you know, if you take this cup,
Right.
it's able to hold what's in it unless you put more in it than
It can hold.
it can hold, right? Or if I put something explosive in there, it would blow the structure of the cup. Well, sometimes people have things going on in the structure of their time that's really exploding their ability to contain that. And that's where we add structure in the form of a coach or an accountability group or a supervisor or a mentor, or put them in a group with other leaders that comes in and helps them to shore up that structure in their life to make these choices.
In fact, you make the point that we can't do this on our own. This is not just willpower, is it?
No.
Part of it's willpower, but there's more than just willpower involved.
Well, exactly. And willpower is an interesting concept because, I mean, if we go back to theology for a moment, you know, everybody talks about, you know, the will of God. Well, will in the Greek in the New Testament, the word that's translated will is the word that means desire. So if you're God, what does that mean? Well, whatever you want is going to happen.
Right.
Your desires are going to come to fruition because you don't have all these conflicts and people who can manipulate.
And if you're a holy God, it's good things.
It's good things. You always will towards good
Right.
things. If you're one of us, we might have the wish to do something. Like everybody goes on a diet, right? New Year's resolution is a great example. You know, I've got the wish to lose 20 pounds, right? But willpower doesn't work when you understand will is desire. See, if I've got the wish to lose 20 pounds, but my real desires are for 14 pizzas every night,
Right.
then I've got to get to where my hungers are. And I find out that those hungers are trying to fill up a lot of emptiness or a lot of pain. I've got to get to the level of what's driving me to this behavior.
Right.
And willpower will never overcome desire.
So this needs, understanding your fears. So
Right.
part of this is understanding self-awareness. Who are you? What drives you? And you can do that how? How do you get a clear picture of what your needs are? Who drives you? How does that happen?
Well, one of the things the audit helps on is when you see a disconnect, then you start to figure out who really is getting the best of my time. You know, managers, I do this with managers and they're like, oh my gosh, I never realized it. But they have like this one dysfunctional employee or coworker. And when they look at their time, 80% of their time is going to putting out fires and solving problems with this one person. Then you have to go to the why. And you get to the whys, and maybe they have a fear of having that hard conversation. Or maybe they do have a fear of firing somebody. Or maybe they have a fear of, if I let this person go, what happens to the rest of my business? You know, and they become dependent on that person's performance in some way. So it never really works till we get to the core of motivation.
And now that's a negative motivation, fear of. There's also something about, I get it, I understand I'm spending 80% of my time.
Right.
I'm doing that though by choice. It's a positive choice. I'm going to try to bring that person to another place because I care about them, I think they have potential, and so it's almost a gift of time. How does that fit in with the whole matrix?
Well, it is a gift of time, but remember, you know, whenever we give something, we want our effort and our giving to be fruitful.
Right,
Okay?
that's true.
So if let's say you've got an irresponsible person, you want to help them. Well, by giving them time and just enabling them to remain that way and doing things for them, it's great to give them time, but maybe what you need to give them in your time are some consequences or some painful choices or some training or something that's going to require offloading the impetus for them to perform better onto their shoulders because they're the only ones that can do it anyway. Then you're still serving them. But like parenting, you know, it's one thing to give time to your kids, but if it's nagging, it's not producing any fruit. If it's discipline, which is always about choices and consequences, then that time that you're spending is going to be resulting in something. So it's never a matter of, am I going to try to help somebody or not? Of course, we want to help everybody. But you got to ask yourself, is my helping helping? And if it's not, you got to cut it.
Well, and that's what stewardship is.
That's stewardship.
You need to steward your own life, and then you have to think about what's the best stewardship of my time in this person's life, and how will they then steward their life better. You know, when we see little children, they don't have boundaries automatically, do they?
They're born with none.
Right. And so as parents, we try to shape those boundaries by, in one way, giving them feedback by consequences. If you do this, then this happens.
Right.
And then hopefully the child learns, well, I don't want that to happen again, so I'm going to do that.
There you got to it. See, you said two of the most, if everybody could get this about children and about even their relationships and about even their companies, what you said was that the child has a realization that they don't want that to happen again.
Right.
So now who's worried about the behavior?
Right.
The only one that can control it, which is the child. You know, when a parent comes in, it just drives me nuts when I hear this, and they say to the kid, "You need to do your homework." The kid's going, "See, that's just a lie.
You don't really need to do your homework.
Obviously not.
Right.
I don't need to do it. I'm not feeling any need to do my homework."
Right.
What's true there is the parent wants them to do their homework.
Right.
So if they change that to, "I want you to do your homework, and if you do it, you get to, you know, eat this year," or you get your ice cream,
Right,
or you,
right.
your TV or whatever, and you're free to not do it. But if you don't, here's what the rest of your week looks like. Which one would you like to do?
Right.
Would you like to have a life or not? Then the kid starts to feel like, oh my gosh, I need to get my homework done. Now we've got a I need instead of you need.
Right. And that's a better motivator, isn't it?
It is
The motivator.
the motivator. See, before there is no motivation,
Right.
except to get this parent out of my face,
Right.
right? Because they're my problem, not the behavior.
It's not positive.
And when leaders begin to realize that the essence of delegation is not just offloading work, the essence of delegation is getting freedom, responsibility, love, and consequences all in the same. Those great existential themes only work in balance. And if you've given somebody responsibility to do something, but they're not free to make the choices to either do it or not, then that's neither loving nor is it effective and efficient.
And this is why if they think about boundary setting as loving, efficient, productive stewardship, it's a much more positive way, because boundaries can have a negative feel. You're shutting something down, you're stifling, you're constraining. But you're saying boundaries brings freedom.
Boundaries absolutely brings freedom. And they can have, in that term, negative feel. That's a really important thing to unpack, because Boundaries, by definition, are negative. You know, I can't stay up all night and watch 3 movies because I want to have energy tomorrow and be able to make it through the day and do some fun things, right? So it's the trick is getting negative to not be negative.
Right.
Getting negative to be positive.
And I think that you can't be concerned with if you say no to the person, that's their problem. And if it feels negative and if they experience it negatively, then they got to deal with that because you're setting up your boundaries.
Right, and that's really a litmus test of your relationship anyway.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
if you think about,
Right.
if you've got a relationship that you can't say no to someone without there being relational consequences, like, do you want to go to lunch? Well, no, I've got some stuff I want to do. Oh, well, you don't care? I thought we were friends.
Exactly.
Then you're no longer a friend, you're a slave. You're an extension of that person's wishes. And if you've got relationships where the freedom is not there to say no, love is broken down.
Exactly. Henry, that is great advice for today. Thank you so much.
It's good to be here.
My guest today has been Henry Cloud, author of The One Life Solution, Reclaim Your Personal Life While Achieving Greater Professional Success. I'm Shirley Hoogstra. Thank you for watching Inner Compass.